Question 4. What is your counsel in a situation where the man believes that he's been called to do full-time ministry and should not engage in employed labor, and that his wife, who is pursuing her career, has been blessed to financially support the ministry? This is similar to one of the questions that Dad answered, I think, 3 Tuesdays ago. First of all, I would say that brother or that man has to be really sure that it is God who has instructed him not to engage in any kind of paid employment. He has to be really sure. And the reason is because we have a lot of people, some men, some brothers who are just lazy and then they hide behind ministry. They just don't want to do anything. And they expect that the wife should carry the financial burden, of the family, and whatever she earns should be used to support the ministry. That's not ideal at all. So I believe that if God gives you the instruction not to engage in paid employment, it's possible that he may not prohibit you from engaging in small businesses, to support yourself. So if he has not prohibited you from doing 1 or 2 businesses, then as much as possible, go ahead and do it. And if he has said strictly, I don't want you to do anything, and you are sure it is God, I believe that God would provide for you. Now, it is God who has designed that a man should be able to provide for his family, or should provide for his family. So if God has called you into full-time ministry and he says, do not get involved in any kind of paid employment, I believe that God will meet your basic needs. You may not have luxuries. You may not have luxuries for a long time. You may not have luxuries. Maybe you may never even have luxuries. But your basic needs, that's the need of your family, God will not leave you stranded, because he's not a wicked God. That's what I believe. And then for your wife, whatever she earns can never be enough to support the ministry, because if God gives you a vision or an assignment, that assignment will always be bigger than you. So if you are hoping that the money that your wife makes, or the money that you make, even if you make billions of dollars, that will be enough to fund or sponsor or support the ministry that God has called you, then I don't think that it was God who gave it to you in the first place. God will always give you something that is his size, because he wants to take the glory. It's not you. He cannot package a ministry or entrust a ministry into your hands, and then you will be the only one. Like, you will be sufficient of yourself, or whatever you make will be sufficient to fund that ministry. It's not possible. That one is your own creation, is your own making, is not God. And there are situations where you hear that, or some men would say, God told me not to do any kind of paid employment. He said I should go into ministry strictly. But you discover that 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, he can barely provide for his family. I mean, basic needs. Most times, so personally, I've even asked my husband this several times. I used to feel like, those people, I don't think they heard well, but I may be wrong. That's what I keep saying. The reason is because I don't believe God is not wicked. Why will he put you to shame? He's saying, come and work for me. Do not do any other thing. And then you keep living year after year, no progress. You cannot provide basic needs for, even if your children cannot go to a private school, these public schools or government schools, they still pay little token, then you cannot, you don't have money to put your children in school, except your wife brings money. No money to even feed, say, once in a day. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I know of a pastor like that. And it's unfortunate that he married a very terrible woman. And no child of God should emulate that kind of woman. This woman would not give him food. She would deny him food. She would insult him in the presence of members. Sometimes, yes, because they were living in the church, I think inside the church. They just had one small, room or so that they were staying. Or when they come for house fellowship or Bible study, it was a small church. This woman will start raining insults on him. And the reason is because she feels she's carrying the financial burden of the family. So she feels he's a useless man because he cannot provide, for her and her children. And I keep wondering, is it God that will really put a man in this kind of situation? Because he claims that it's not like he's lazy, like he doesn't want to work. It's just that God told him. And when I heard this thing, I said, no, I don't think it is God. If it is God, he will provide. When we got married, God instructed my husband to go into full-time ministry. Like, he forbade him from doing anything, any paid employment. And it wasn't funny. My husband didn't really like it. He had always known that he was going to be in ministry, or rather, he was even in ministry before I met him, before he even got into the university. And when I knew him in the university, he was already a traveling preacher and fully into ministry, even though he was still a student. But when God told him that, I just want you to face ministry, squarely, he was volunteering with a missions organization, and his salary was, or rather allowance was just little stipend, That couldn't do anything for us, really. Our wedding was just a miracle. The summary of it, because it's quite long if I have to start sharing it, I just tell people that God sponsored our wedding. God did far, far more than we could ask. We didn't plan for anything big. We were very conservative with our budget and our planning, but God so blew it more than times 10 or times, I don't know, whether 100 of what we planned, and it was just God. So it was so obvious to us, that God was with us, and he was in that relation, he was the one who orchestrated our relationship and then our wedding. So after we got married, I needed to go to law school. Like a few months after our wedding, I needed to go to law school, and we were just looking up onto God. We didn't know where we were going to get finances from. But God did not put us to shame. God provided miraculously. I didn't have to borrow. A lot of my classmates had to borrow money to pay for law school fees. Then we paid 220,000, and aside from the laptops, we were asked that you have to come with laptop. That year they were like, it's compulsory. You come with your laptop. So the money for laptop, then your feeding, you are not allowed to cook, so you have to buy food. And I was pregnant with my first child. I even wanted Kano, because I felt foodstuff would be cheaper in Kano than in Abuja. So Kano was my first choice. Abuja was my second choice. But God posted me to Abuja. And I was like, God, how are we going to cope? But God saw us through. So now he didn't like it, because it was like, God, you are putting me in a situation where I have to. Nobody likes to, that uncertainty. You want to be sure that at the end of the month or at the end of 1 week, something definite. But you just keep walking by faith, just depending on God. So that uncertainty. But it was like one day at a time. And then we, from day one, in fact, when we went for our honeymoon, there were people in our house before we went for honeymoon. And while we were there, when we came back, we still met people in the house. So from day one, we had people living with us. Different batches of people, like coming and going from day one. So it wasn't just about I and my husband just feeding, We had other people to take care of, people that were under our roof. And then those that were coming occasionally, that saw our house like a family house. Students that would just come without even informing you, because they felt so free in the house, come maybe for a weekend, sometimes for 1 week, depending. Or once, some people can decide not to go home for break, and it's your house they are staying in, like that. So we had people, in our home. And God provided one day at a time. We never lacked, we never borrowed. I'm sure you heard the story of how one day we almost went to bed without food, but God just, provided for us in a miraculous way. And that was when he just returned from Oxford. He had finished his school in Oxford and he came home. And anyway, if I want to give you that story now, from my perspective, it's a very long one. But I was like, God has a sense of humor. I'm sure I've shared that with 1 or 2 people. God has a great sense of humor, And I was like, I told him that I have never experienced this kind of thing. While you were away, the kind of provision we enjoyed. But as soon as you came, things became tight. But God, because I was pregnant for Asha. I was pregnant for Asha. See, lifted up. I went under the bed to check. I was searching for just 15 naira. Even 20 naira I couldn't find. All my handbags, I turned them upside down. Lifted mattress, checked under carpet whether I kept 20 naira or 15 naira somewhere. All we had then was pap. Number one, I don't like pap. Then I was pregnant again. So you know how a pregnant woman will be hungry. I gave birth to Asha a few days after he returned from Oxford. You know, though of course he was visiting every time he came home. That was another supernatural provision. And some of you have heard that testimony of how God provided for his school and all of that. Anyway, let me not go off point. So I believe that if God was the one who instructed you as a man of God, that you shouldn't work, you shouldn't go into paid employment, you'll be faithful to provide for you. And then your wife, or your wife to be, you should bring her into that understanding. She has to agree. Please, don't deceive her. Let her not think that, you know, there are some people, they will just, there's a way they just use one kind of wayo wisdom, you know, cunningly make the woman marry them, and she will marry him with the hope that he will look for a job to support us. You know, it won't just be only me. And then by the time you get married, you now just sit down and relax. Like, okay, she cannot leave anymore. You know, we're already joined together. And then you now start telling her that God said, I should not do any paid employment. No, please do not deceive her. Both of you should be on the same page. So let her be the one to agree. And I believe that if God has given you the instruction not to going to have any paid employment, it's not going to be the financial struggle or the lack or the whatever. It will not be for too long. I believe that it's going to be from glory to glory. God will not leave you on one spot for a while, for a long time. No, he may test you. There will be that time of testing, that time of trying you, you know. But as you depend on him, as you are faithful to the work or to the assignment that he's giving unto you, he will lift you up. You will grow from grace to grace. A time will come that it will no longer be messy drops of provision. It will now be like a tap or a flowing fountain. You know, that you will not even need to pray for provision. People like that, they are Deboye, Oyedepo. Please, you think praying for provision is part of what they do presently? Thinking especially what to eat, what to drink, what to wear, or houses to live in. Do you think they are at that stage? These are people that God has blessed them, lifted them up, not by cajoling people. Now, they are genuine men of God, that the way God, as you walk with God and you are faithful, committed to the work that he has given unto you, God, a time will come that the blessings you receive from people will be just too much. You just keep giving them out. So sometimes when people criticize men of God, you see this big car that he's driving, see the big cars in his house and all of, what is he doing? Sometimes out of maybe 10, let's say 10 that you saw, you don't know that he has given maybe 150 out, or bought over 100 for other people. I know of a pastor like that. You know, you see them changing cars. Sometimes it's not from their money. Maybe out of 10 that you have seen, is probably 1 or 2 that he bought with his money. The rest came as gifts. But your eyes should not be fixed on the material gain of serving God. Your eyes should be fixed on Jesus. Let your heart be committed to the work. Do it in sincerity, in lack or in abundance, and learn how to be abased. And when you are in the midst of plenty or prosperity, remember the God that brought you there. Know how to conduct yourself, comport yourself, learn how to live, both, you know, whether you are high up there or below. The major thing is that you heard God, and God has assured you of his presence. And then for a woman who finds herself in that kind of situation, or a sister, do not despise your husband because you earn more than him. Especially if you agreed to go into marriage with him, knowing that you have the financial, you earn much more than him, and maybe you will even earn much more than him for a long time. Do not disrespect him. Do not look down on him. Do not embarrass him. Do not, you know, expose him. You don't have to tell people that I was the one who did this. I'm the one who buys this for the house. Because the table can just change at any time. And you'll find out that God will lift him beyond your imagination. Praise the Lord.